Welcome to the English Hour on ANN Satellite Television. Our guest this week is Dr. Khalid Al Mubarak. Khalid is a London-based diplomat. He's a spokesperson for the Embassy of Sudan here in London. But far from just being a career diplomat, Khalid is also a columnist for both Al-Sharq Al-Awsat and Al-Hayat newspapers, as well as for Al-Qabas in Kuwait and Al-Ray Alam in Sudan. He's also a prize-winning playwright and former Communist Party member. In his younger days, he served as chairman of the powerful Khartoum University Students' Union. We're very pleased to welcome Dr. Khalid Al Mubarak to the English Hour here on ANN. Well, welcome, Dr. Khalid. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to talk about, obviously, about the situation in Sudan, but one of the things that strikes me most powerfully is that the partition of Sudan into Sudan and South Sudan has turned out to be rather a catastrophe from the point of view of both nations, wouldn't you say? I mean, what is your perspective on that situation?
Well, the partition, there are several factors. The Southerners have fought two civil wars from 1955 until 1972, and then from 1983 until 2005.
Yeah, more than 2 million dead, I think.
Yeah, many, and that also it did not only destroy the South, it distorted the economy of the whole country and created many, but it was an expression of their eagerness for their own state. So the fact that our government had the far-sightedness to accept this has not been widely acknowledged, but it was President Obama said when the referendum took place, he said that was an inspiration to the whole humanity, which it was. So this is one aspect. The other aspect is that there was some impatience on the part of some powers who were eager to divide the country for their own geopolitical interests. For example, our government suggested 10 years transitional period before the referendum in order to prepare the South for the Southerners for independence if it took place, and also in order to hammer out all, for example, the matters like the border and the oil and the citizenship and so many problems. But our position was overruled by the big powers and by some of our brothers, the Southerners, who were also impatient for the referendum.
I mean, and in the early days, of course, people like John Garang wanted unity, wanted one Sudan, and it was not. I mean, it's come to a very powerful vote for independence in the end, but that position was not the view of all in the beginning. There was an attempt, even under early days, to hold Sudan together. No. I mean, people did want to see one Sudan.
Well, it's doubtful whether the SPLM as a movement or John Garang even wanted one Sudan. There's a question mark there. Some analysts, including Dr. Francis Deng, who is a Southerner, now representing them in the United Nations, in his latest writings, he said, Garang had the position of the fallback position of secession.
I'm sure the fallback, yes, because his preferred outcome was the United Sudan. I mean, I think there are many in the South and in the North who feel saddened, and it was a project by Britain and America and Norway, really, the splitting of Sudan, wasn't it? Those are the three lead nations who were pushing for this division of Sudan.
Well, it was mainly United States and mainly certain constituencies in the United States.
Well, you say United States, but I remember the first architects of this were British diplomats. Indeed, one very famous British diplomat in the days when Derek Fatchett was our Secretary of State. I mean, there is no question that the British had a key lead role in pushing this forward.
But the British, remember, in 1947, held a certain conference called the Juba Conference, in which they played the main role in the Southerners and Northerners agreeing that when independence comes, they would leave the Sudan united and not separate the South and unite it with Uganda or Kenya.
Because it has seemed certainly to me as an outsider, a slight catastrophe. Now North Sudan has lost 3/4 of her oil revenue. If you like, it's southern oil revenue, you can, whichever way you call it. Sudan, the north is in economic crisis with 20% unemployment and indeed protests on the streets. The south is also, because of its internal divisions and its internecine war that has been ongoing. Hopefully, inshallah, it's being resolved now. But the south is also, oil production is cut by half because of the fighting. So one way or another, it's not been a happy outcome to this partition.
No, it has not been a happy outcome. But those who pushed for secession will never say we were wrong. Yes. Because if you are a superpower, you'll never say I was wrong and my assessment was wrong. And even now, let us hope that they will not intervene, because one of the main factors pushing for secession was, to put it not mildly, to hurt the North.
Yeah, I think you really think so? Because of the North's love of Islamic law and so on, because of it being...
No, because of the North is Arabic speaking and Islamic, and there were constituencies, especially in the US, who are anti-Arab and anti-Islamic because of the whole Middle East
But can you
situation.
Really blame America? I mean, it was Alan Gulty, the British diplomat, that pushed through the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. And then once that was done, the die was cast. I mean, at the end of the day, it is if you want to blame anybody for plotting, America played a very secondary role. It was the British that pushed this whole deal through.
Yeah, but the British and the Americans are, as we say in Arabic, two parts of the same equation.
Wow.
The British and the Americans work together, they coordinate together, and I have a great deal of respect for Alan Gulty, but Alan Gulty is not an individual. The West acts in unison and in coordination, and there has been a sort of understanding that this is what we do, what we should do, and...
You may be right. I always put it down. I do think that individuals shape history in some degree, and I remember Derek Fatchett, that Minister of State, took a personal interest in Sudan, went to Sudan, and negotiated a ceasefire in a small area between the north and the south. It wasn't even a complete ceasefire, it was a partial ceasefire in one small area. And I think, and then he got a bee in his bonnet about Sudan, appointed Alan Gulty special envoy, and I would say, I mean, bless his heart, he's dead now, so we can't consult him, but Derek Fatchett, in a sense, was the architect of the partition of Sudan in that sense. It's, at least that's my perspective. I certainly think it's in many ways a tragedy. The Comprehensive Peace Agreement was never a comprehensive peace agreement, and it dealt with this one issue without dealing with the rest of Sudan's problems. Wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah. The Comprehensive Peace Agreement was very good on paper, but the Comprehensive Peace Agreement was contested all through. Our government was faithful and implemented to the letter its commitments, including the referendum. For example, the Southerners were given almost full control of the South, and they contributed to the central government also. They had a fair share in the central government, yes, 28% in the central government. Oil was divided fairly for the transitional period, and John Garang was appointed first vice president,
yes,
Christian.
In the transitional period, things were happier than since the partition, really. The situation, I mean, much of this is, in a way, to my way of thinking as an outsider, much of the engine for the Sudanese catastrophe was the adoption of Islamic law in Sudan. I mean, I remember I'm older now than many, and I can remember the days of Numeri's presidency, and in the period until he decided until the last 2 years of his presidency, when he shifted to Islamic law, Sudan was a fairly, well, it had come out of a civil war. It was a fairly stable place. Then all this tragedy began, and it's an ongoing difficulty. I mean, Islamic law is causing huge problems for Sudan, no?
Yeah, well, the problems of the Sudan are not Islamic law. Islamic law and Islamic current in the Sudan is not just political. It is an expression of the national interest. For example, the antecedents of our nationalism in the 19th century, the Mahdi, expressed himself in a religious way. After that, the beginnings of the political parties, they all had the Islamic aspect as part of their vision for the future of the country.
But it's caused huge tensions in what is essentially what was essentially a secular country. I mean, you and to this day, I can remember under Numeri, you had a very free, during that period anyway, you had a very free Sudan, a comparatively free press. Even Al Rai Alam, the paper you write for, had some press freedom, and you had quite a vibrant society. It's things have become much tenser in recent years, and up to a point where some of the strictures of Islamic law have really caused enormous problems for Sudan.
Yeah, but remember that Numeri was overthrown.
Yes.
Numeri was overthrown not because of Sharia law, but because of his dictatorial tendencies and because he was a darling of the West. And he did two things which make him darling of the West. He transported the Falasha Jews to Israel, and he also
did what?
No, he was very dictatorial.
Yeah.
In running the country. So and also as far as the South is concerned, he aborted the Addis Ababa agreement.
Yes, unfortunately, in the end,
and he restarted the civil war again. So many factors.
Yes.
Not only Sharia law. He was, for example, we were against him because he aborted the Addis Ababa agreement. We supported the Addis Ababa, which gave the country 11 years of peace.
Is it genuinely true that women have been arrested for wearing trousers in Sudan? I heard this story. Is this true?
I think this was exaggerated by tabloids in the West.
But it did happen.
Until now we have our university education is not segregated. Women have 25% seats in the parliament, more than women in the UK and the United States. We have women diplomats, we have women even footballers, we have women business women who are very successful. We have our deputy speaker of parliament is a woman, and so there was some sort of distortion and some sort of populist.
So this did not happen?
No, it was what happened in that case was a case of rowdy behavior in which a young woman insulted a policeman and then he took the matter further. It had nothing to do with her trousers. And she came. Now they wear trousers in the Sudan. Our women wear trousers in the Sudan.
So, but on a more disturbing level, we have, I mean, it's a case of vast international prominence. We've seen the case of Miriam. I mean, that also a consequence of Islamic law.
This is another example of Western tabloid sensationalization. This is a case, family case. The state was not involved in this.
Unless it wouldn't happen unless you had Sharia law.
Well, this young woman's brother and other members of the family, they are the ones who traced her, and they are the ones who complained. Yeah. And as far as the state is concerned, as far as the government is concerned, the junior judge in a very preliminary court passed this sentence. There is an appeal court and another appeal court up to the constitutional court before any lashing or hanging or whatever. Amnesty International started a campaign as if this young woman was going to be hanged tomorrow, which is unfair to our legal system. Or I received letters from people saying why this is very unfair as far as religious freedom, which is in our constitution. I say our constitution says the country is a multi-religious, multilingual, and multi-tribal country.
Well, it is, of course.
Multicultural country.
Yeah, very much
and
so.
The lawyers of this young woman know this, and they have got a chance to appeal and to challenge the sentence of a very junior court.
But the fundamental flaw is that the system condemns a woman to death for her beliefs in any case. I mean, in the first instance.
Well, there is controversy, as I'm sure you know, in Islam, as used to be in Christianity and in Judaism also, about apostasy, and there are many theological theological ideas. And Europe, at some time, there was the man who translated the Bible into English was burnt on the stake. Yeah. And when people change their denomination, something happened to them. So what happens in religion? Islam is a much younger religion than Christianity and Judaism, and there are certain processes which take place in religions. We see many things, but sometimes time is needed.
But our historic barbarity, and we were very barbarous in Middle Ages and even through to comparatively recent history, is no excuse in the modern world for any other nation. I mean, we are not an example. We have been disgraceful. That doesn't mean that others should follow our behavior. It is concerning because Sudan was such, to my way of thinking as a young man, I found Sudan a very inspiring, very multicultural society, very secular actually. And now you feel that it's sort of moved backwards.
Well, our Islam was very much influenced by the Sufis, because we were Christians. We did not embrace Islam as a result of Arab conquest or as a result of wanting to avoid paying the jizya, for example, as happened in many other countries. We adopted Islam peacefully through tradesmen and through individual missionaries who actually intermarried with the local population.
But even after partition, you are a multicultural society.
We are,
and with many, indeed, people of all religions and none. You still have Christians in Sudan. You still have animists. And,
of course, we have. In our cabinet, we have Dr. Tabita Butrus, who was with me here when I was with the opposition before the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. She was with me in the opposition here. She is Christian, and she is now a member of the cabinet. And she wears trousers and she wears shorts and anything she likes. She's a lovely
Because
young woman.
it is concerning. I mean, it's also Sudan is the if you like, it's the model that other nations may look at that are frightened of how things could go if you have Sharia law. I mean, we're looking at a Middle East now which has movements for Sharia law, and it is not exactly comforting the way it has gone in Sudan.
Well, it depends how you look at it. For example, the National Congress Party, which is the Islamist party in Sudan, hasn't got the name of Islam in its title. It has got Christian members. I was invited as an observer to one of their conferences, and they have adopted the view that the state is a matter of interest for the general population, that the state, nothing relevant to the state or governance is holy or religious, that this has to be dealt with in the interest of what's good for the population, what's good for the economy, what's good. And this is a very advanced and open-minded view to adopt especially among Islamists compared to the Middle East. What the danger is, because they are cold-shouldered and there's an attempt to suffocate them economically through sanctions, this will play into the hands of the fanatics, not only in Nigeria, but in the whole Middle East, when they say, look at the Sudanese, they haven't got the name of Sudanese Islamic, they haven't got the name of Islam, they have got Christian members, they accept that the state is not holy, it's for human beings to handle and to run and to improve, but they are targeted by the West. So what is the incentive of being moderate? Because this is what's happening to the moderates of the Sudan. Look, so if the National Congress Party says to the Boko Haram and the others, be moderate, they say, oh, you are moderate, look what's happening to you.
It's a good point, actually, because we've had this partition of Sudan, rightly or wrongly, driven by the West, and I had thought that sanctions would be lifted as a consequence. They haven't.
They were promised. There was a promise to lift the sanctions. Promises were made at the highest level to President Bashir and to the ministers that if you honor your commitment to the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, sanctions will be lifted, your name will be deleted from the terrorist sponsors list, and will normalize relations with you. Alan Golty said at the Woodrow Wilson Center that these were not met. Alex Duval said promises were broken and that this is very dangerous because if you because international leadership is responsibility.
Yes, the duplicitous West. We are really unbelievable. But that said, you mentioned the economic crisis. Sudan is in economic crisis. You do have, perhaps arguably, around 20% unemployment in Sudan. You have got this enormous problem of 2/3, if not 3/4, of the oil wealth now is not coming your way. You have had demonstrations on the streets of young people who feel disempowered and who want jobs, who want a way forward. It is a very difficult situation for the government of Sudan at the moment.
It is, but remember we had demonstrations last September because we implemented the IMF's recipe. The IMF sent a delegation and the IMF said, our prescription is this and this and this, and because we are committed to reforming the economy, our government implemented that, and that was when the BBC and others reported the demonstrations. Many of them, I don't say all, many did not report that this happened because the Sudan was faithful and implemented the IMF recipe for reforming the economy. This part was left out, only the demonstration.
The IMF historically are troublemakers in much of the world. They haven't been very helpful to many nations. I remember we had bread riots in Egypt at one point when the IMF trying to impose conditions. They're not thoughtful and helpful, but nonetheless there is an underlying economic crisis that Sudan is facing, IMF or no IMF, that is serious, isn't it? I mean, it is.
Well, there is. It is serious, and many steps have been taken to change the situation or improve the situation. For example, the question of taxation has been handled, and we have now value added for sales. We have had it for some time. There is now an attempt to diversify from oil, increase our own oil production in the north, but also diversify. Gold is now a very important source of income for our government. Very surprising. Some of it is smuggled, but most of it is now sold and supports the economy. Now we have also turned to our real gold, which is agriculture.
Yes.
We have land in plenty, we have rain in many parts of the country, and just as the British set up the Jazeera scheme to support the colonial administration, now the Jazeera scheme is being revamped and revived.
Is it successful? It's going all right, the Jazeera scheme? Because, I mean, isn't your family from that part of the world? No.
I am from my father is from Kosti, which is the edge of the Jazeera scheme. Mm-hmm. But my family was involved.
It's a magnificent scheme, or it was a magnificent.
Now it's being regenerated with help also. We have European community help, British help, and in some cases also American help. And we are expanding in agriculture, in wheat and other things. So the way to confront the crisis is not just to be sorry about it, but to take measures, and the government has taken measures. Some of the measures are painful, but they were taken. Especially some people complained about the way the taxation has been revised, and the Islamic laws have also helped, because the zakah is now very important. And yesterday I read a very important item that the European Central Bank is adopting some aspects of the zakah, which is if you have
the
deposit.
The government collects zakah?
Yeah, if you have deposit.
The government collects it?
No, the zakah is separate from the government.
And people are forced to pay it?
But it helps, of course. It helps in projects, it helps in the
so it's not voluntary, civil society. Or it is voluntary?
Well, if you are Muslim, it's collected. Your consent is important, but it's collected. But if you have money as a deposit and you don't touch it for a whole year,
so
as far as the zakah is concerned, it's taxed then.
But it's not.
Now the European Union,
collected from non-Muslims.
European Union is doing the same thing. No, the non-Muslims are exempted.
So
the non-Muslims in the south, before secession, were exempted from all aspects of Sharia.
Obviously, the North-South problem was a problem, is still a problem for Sudan. I still think of Sudan as one nation, as my shorthand, but for the Sudan, if you like, Sudan and South Sudan, that division, the tensions there are still ongoing. But you have major internal problems in Darfur, as well as, not counting issues like the Bija and so on, but the Darfur issue remains a major tragedy. I mean, do you see this? Do you see any way forward on this?
Well, as far as Darfur is concerned, at long last, there is international consensus about the way forward. A conference was held in Qatar, hosted by Qatar in Doha. And the conference, the Americans participated in it, the British participated in it, the Russians participated, the Chinese participated, and there was an agreement that what they called the Darfur, the Doha document for peace in Darfur was adopted unanimously.
Agreed by all the parties?
Oh yeah,
including all of the...
Yeah, the Americans were there.
No, I'm not... Who cares about the Americans? I'm talking about the people on the ground who are fighting. Did they agree to it?
Well, the people on the ground have different agendas. They are not united, but some of them laid down their arms. For example, a part of GEM, which is the main Justice and Equality Movement, the main armed group, they were split, and part of them joined the Doha document for peace in Darfur.
And the other part didn't.
The other part, they are still fighting. They are not fighting in Darfur now. They are fighting in southern Sudan. Also, they crossed the border.
Yeah, well, now they're one rebel group fighting both governments.
They fought in Chad in the past. They fought in Darfur itself. Now they are fighting in southern Sudan.
And SLA, what about them? Are they?
SLA are much smaller and less effective, but they are all they lost most of the areas they used to control, what they call the...
But they agree to this Doha agreement? No.
Some of them agreed, but some did not agree. Let us remember that, for example, Abdul Wahid Noor of the Sudan liberation, it used to be Darfur liberation, and then it became Sudan Liberation Front. And he has got offices in Tel Aviv, and he has written an article. But that's scarcely
the issue, is it? I mean, the Sudanese in Darfur have had major problems. The government have clamped down. I mean, you look, even now, you have difficulties. The member of the Congress Party, one of the leaders of the Congress Party, spoke out and about rape and he was arrested. And that's true, no? I mean, the issues in relation to Darfur continue to...
There are still issues in Darfur, but politically and militarily, the rebels are now on their back foot because there is now reconciliation with Chad.
But the whole...
And Gaddafi has gone. Gaddafi used to support them. The BBC had a program about Gaddafi's last allies. They even fought, they fought NATO, trying to keep Gaddafi in power because they were based there. Gaddafi is gone. Now there is reconciliation with Chad.
But I mean, those that feel strongly, even the Arab community, and I'm talking about the Khartoum Arab community, the Khartoum politicians, when they speak out on the Darfur issue, they are arrested. I mean, even some of your most senior people, Sadiq al-Mahdi, who is a very elderly gentleman, I assume, he's just been arrested for speaking out about the behavior of the troops of the government of Sudan in regard to Darfur. I mean, this is so, I mean, there's something fundamentally wrong. You have to, if you want the kind of national dialogue that the president has been asking for, the national dialogue for peace, then there has to be a more gentle approach from the government of Sudan.
The national dialogue was an initiative of the president. It has been supported by outside forces, including the United States and the British and others interested in the Sudan. And it's going ahead. It had some setbacks, but these setbacks are not fatal to the process. The main parties which agreed are still in agreement, and there are negotiations. The Sudan is, as the British realized, not easy to govern, and the the parties are not easy to bring to a consensus and to persuade to make concessions. But the president was very clear that the problems of the country cannot be solved by him or his party alone, that all others have to join hands. And he said this has to be inclusive, meaning that even those fighting the government in Darfur are welcome to come and join. And he can't go further than that. He said they will be given pardons to come and guarantees that they won't be arrested if they come. But they are.
But what guarantees when he's busy arresting Arab Sudanese politicians? I mean, how can they feel confident if he arrests somebody like Sadiq al-Mahdi? I mean, it is disturbing that you do need more tolerance in Sudan, more tolerance of the other. I mean, just a sense of inclusiveness if you're going to have a national dialogue for peace.
Yes, but remember, I have lived in London now for many years. There is no Communist Party headquarters here in London. There is no Communist. I was in Washington, D.C.
Oh, we have a Communist Party in Britain, believe me, but still.
Yeah, but I knew some of its members. But in the Sudan, they have got headquarters. They hold meetings. They mobilize their members. They collect.
But is there anything wrong with that? I mean, you
said about tolerance.
Yeah.
Of course, there is tolerance. There is tolerance. There is the Communist Party. There are the Ba'athists who spoiled everything in Iraq and with Saddam Hussein, and now they are in the opposition, but they are allowed in the political process. So we have newspapers. Most of the newspapers are critical of the government. Most of them are critical of the government, but they publish, they criticize the president, they criticize the ruler of Khartoum, and they do so sometimes very unfairly, but they continue publishing. So the arrest of Sadiq al-Mahdi is an exceptional thing which happened, and I don't think it's something which will continue for a long time, but this is not up to me, it's up to the legal system. But it gave the impression that there was no tolerance. But Farouk Abu Isa, whom I knew personally when we were both members of the Communist Party and we were both in exile here in London, and I have known him for a long time, he holds meetings and he mobilizes against the government, and he says the regime is going to fall anyway. That's why we are not going to take part in any dialogue with the government. And he goes to his house every night. So there is a great deal of tolerance. Only there are some aspects which give the opposite impression, and they are magnified.
What does disturb me, and here I think we will agree, you and I, the activities of the International Criminal Court. I mean, it is worrying. They described your president as a war criminal, or have indicted him. Well, regardless of the justification of or otherwise of any charges, the point is that it is. And this is pertinent to other conflicts that we have today, Syria, for example, and many situations. It is this approach that the West has adopted now of using this criminal court to prosecute people for historic crimes, whether they're right or they're wrong, actually completely paralyzes processes for peace in many respects. I mean, it's very unfortunate. Would you agree with me, or are you?
Well, Dr. Louis Arbour, who was one of the people who pushed through the referring Darfur to the International Criminal Court, and then she left and went to become head of the International Crisis Group until recently. She said openly that that decision was wrong. She admitted after so many years that was wrong. The British knew very well, because during colonial rule there were more than 30 clashes, tribal clashes in Darfur between tribes about the same cause, which is the nomads and the pastoralists colliding with each other. This was, even Susan Rice said in the name of the United States that the desertification and climate change has been seen by many as a factor in the Darfur.
Well, of course it was. Also, the arming
crisis
of the Janjaweed by the Sudanese government, I mean, has to be a factor. There are all sorts of factors, but at the end of the day, the underlying issue I just wanted to get at was that the International Criminal Court itself is part of the problem rather than part of the solution.
It's, as we see, it's a neo-colonial institution. One of the proofs of that is that the EU has got something called the Cotonou Agreement for aid to Africa. The Cotonou Agreement has got a clause which says you will only get aid from through the Cotonou Agreement if you sign up to the ICC, which means you think you are independent, you have a flag, you have a national anthem, but we can still strangle you and we will bring you to your knees through our economic dominance. That's what it says.
And yet I can understand why people think the ICC is a good thing, but every time, the problem is that we have ongoing conflicts, and when you are condemning, serving politicians who are acting heads of state, or indeed in, or there's one governor of one province that's also on the border between the south and the north that's also indicted by the ICC. Then these people are marginalized from any peace process that, in a sense, because you disempower the very people that are part of the way forward for peace. It's a very dangerous
You are quite
approach.
right. President Bashir was indicted before the referendum of the South. So they wanted us to interrupt the peace process and put an end to the referendum by sending our president to the ICC. It's most unreasonable and it was not worth. Of course, the principle is right. The Sudan at the beginning supported the process of the ICC. The idea, of course, the idea of having international justice, but then the winter issue of the Yale Journal interviewed Luis Moreno Ocampo, and he said openly, he said, do you think that the law is for the weak? No. He said the strong don't need the law. The strong do what they want. And he said, if I am strong, I can tell you what to do with your law.
Yes.
This is Luis Moreno Ocampo himself.
I'm not sure. You say the principle is right. I'm not sure the principle is right. I think the better principle is the approach of South Africa, where they had truth and reconciliation committees, where they had, in post-war situations, where they had mechanisms for resolving these issues that were not tribunals in the sense of judgmental, the judgmental approach. I'm not sure the mechanism is right. I don't think it helps in post-war situations to be arresting people for war crimes. But that's my perspective.
Well, the Sudan in the beginning was interested in the principle that it's good to make sure that nobody gets away with mass murder. And, of course, they had in mind things which actually happened. A war of aggression took place illegally, against Iraq, but neither Prime Minister nor President who did that were dragged in front of the...
You're talking about the British Prime Minister and the American President. Yeah, I mean, yes, it is. I mean, I think there are all sorts of questions with regard to the war in Iraq. I personally, I supported it. It wasn't just the British Prime Minister and the American President, but I think it was actually led by our press, that particular war. We were led to war by our newspapers. That's, again, a personal opinion. I think actually we are often led in the West to war by our newspapers. But...
not by certain lobby groups.
No, our newspapers.
For a certain Middle Eastern country in the United States who also now want an attack on Iran.
I know you like...
They now want an attack on Iran.
They don't get one. It's not going to happen.
They will not get it, but they got the Iraq one.
No, it was not
They got the Iraq one, and they got the sanctions on the Sudan, because Netanyahu said during the AIPAC conference in 2007, divest Iran, divest Sudan. And that's why there are sanctions on the Sudan.
I noticed this from past conversations with you. You are quite fond of blaming Israel for Sudan's problems, but at the end of the day, I mean, you can't... Israel was not responsible, I don't think, for Sudan or for Iraq. I mean, the Iraq war is a situation that came about because of this enormous sense of resentment at the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq. And prior to that, to some degree, Iraq was the darling of the West because she was our bulwark against Iran, who we were very frightened of, and we were quite willing to be very forgiving of Saddam Hussein. The invasion of Kuwait stepped on our toes, our oil interests, and if Kuwait, being blunt about it, if Kuwait had produced rice and not oil, we probably wouldn't have done a thing.
Yeah,
Kuwait produced oil. We were involved. This disturbed us. We reacted. I mean, and the whole chain of events after that was largely to do with hubris and pride, and very much, I think, media-led the whole attack. The degree to which people like Tony Blair and President Bush Sr. and Jr. were acting of their own volition, or whether they were driven by media frenzy. We respond a lot to media frenzy in the West.
Yeah, but remember, when I say Israel, I mean the far right in Israel.
For you, it's all one, huh?
No, the far right in Israel, which part of it is messianic and part of it is fascistic, as Amos Oz has said.
I know this is you cannot blame Israel for all its flaws, and Israel has many flaws, and I'm the first to agree with it. Israel is seriously flawed society, and it's a real problem the way things are going in terms of the government of Israel. But you can't blame Israel for Iraq. Israel is not a factor there. Who cares what Israel thinks? It's not really relevant. We care what our press think, what our media think, what our population think. We are driven by our passions. Israel is irrelevant.
Yes, but you care about...
Utterly irrelevant.
But Americans care about their first strategic partner. And they consult their first strategic partner, and they say it openly. Of course,
they consult all their partners, but that's not the point. In this context, Israel is irrelevant. Israel is utterly irrelevant to the invasion of Iraq. Israel is completely irrelevant. If yes, in some senses, because Saddam Hussein used Scuds to attack Tel Aviv. Yes, in some senses during that period after the occupation of Kuwait, but Israel was a factor, but it's not the prime driver of our policy. It's no way. I mean, would we have, if Saddam Hussein had not attacked Israel with Scuds, would we have still liberated Kuwait? Of course we would. Kuwait was a vital oil interest, and we had to liberate Kuwait. It was not an option.
Yeah, no, there are two Gulf Wars, of course. The Kuwait one, I was in Kuwait. I know what happened in Kuwait. I was there when Saddam Hussein's forces entered, and I saw the destruction they did. I was witness to the resistance of the young Kuwaitis who improvised cars in order to attack tanks.
Yes,
very brave young men and women. So the Kuwait Liberation War was quite legitimate and quite justified, and I also supported it at that time. So it's different, but let us agree that there is a measure of coordination between strategic partners, and that the Sudan pays part. For example, we are criticized because Hamas has got an office in Khartoum.
You know, well, we know that all the Israelis are paranoid about the Sudanese role in supplying weapons. All the weapons that come to Gaza, such as they are, they're not that many, they're not that much, but they come through Khartoum.
That's not true. That's not true. I met an Israeli-British citizen once in a discussion here in this country, and he said the caravan which was destroyed, that was during Hosni Mubarak's time. The caravan was carrying arms for Hamas through Sudan, and the Israeli Air Force interrupted it. I said, I will ask you one simple question. Hosni Mubarak was an ally of Israel, and the Mossad and the Egyptian intelligence worked hand in hand against Hamas. So why didn't the Israelis just tell the Egyptians about the caravan and tell CNN and the BBC and everybody to come and wait, and then catch the Sudan and Hamas red-handed and photograph he could not answer that, and photograph the weapons. There were no weapons. These were desperate young men from the Horn of Africa, and 119 were killed in the desert. They pay money to people who smuggle them through, and then they go to Israel, and there then Netanyahu and his cabinet call them cancer.
The arms smuggling trail is, because that
was human trafficking.
The weapons are usually Chinese manufacture, and they usually come, however they are acquired, they come through Sudan, and then they go up and smuggle through the Sinai, where the people are feeling very disempowered because
even during Hosni Mubarak's time, it was almost impossible to do anything across the border. It was almost impossible.
I'm not so sure. I think
then Hamas got its weapons sometimes from Israeli soldiers.
That has happened historically in years gone by.
But they bought from Israeli soldiers.
In the West Bank, that certainly happened. But Hamas in the West Bank did do that. The Hamas in Gaza hasn't had the same opportunity, but having said that, in more recent years, it has been.
But anyway, even the Americans now accept that Hamas is a national liberation movement in a country which is occupied. It's occupied until now because it is still enclosed, and everything is controlled by Israel. The air is controlled, the ports are controlled, what they breathe is also controlled by Israel. So the fact that a national liberation movement has got an office in our country is not a crime. It is.
No, we don't. I don't say it's a crime. I'm just saying that you have, you are. Israel is wary of you for that reason, because they perceive you as an arms supplier. The rights and wrongs of that is another.
Well, Israeli arms were caught by the United Nations in Darfur.
I'm sure.
And when they were asked, they said the international market in arms is very great, and we shall. So how do you know that we have sold these to the Darfur rebels?
I think,
and the United Nations had no answer.
No, the arms are everywhere. Is awash with arms, supplied by everybody, and it's.
That's what the Israelis said. They said this is not proof that we are arming the rebels of Darfur.
We have a situation where we do need a way forward. I know that you are a man of peace. You do believe strongly in peace and reconciliation. What is your hope? How can we see this national dialogue moving forward? How can we see all parties coming together for rapprochement in Sudan? I mean, where is it achievable? Will we see a more tolerant, a more open Sudan that is?
I think it's achievable because there is readiness on all sides to make concessions. They realize that it will never succeed without conceding ground to the other parties. The government is definitely ready to make concessions, and the opposition, Sadiq al-Mahdi, even in his detention, when he was visited, he told his supporters that dialogue should continue. Should be. His son is still part of the presidential setup.
All credit to him.
Yeah, he's still there. He did not resign. So those who refuse the dialogue are the communists, the Ba'athists, and some part of the Darfur groups. And the government has indicated, President Bashir has indicated readiness to pay the price for a successful dialogue, which is inclusive, and he said inclusive, including those who are refusing now. That's why I am optimistic. I think if all sides make the necessary compromises, and if the outside umbrella, which is always important, also pushes for successful dialogue to bring in those who are refusing, I think it will succeed for the sake of not only the Sudan, our original Sudan, for the sake of both Sudans, because the South also needs us, and we need the South. The South, if it is stable, we also get transition fees.
Yes, for the oil. Yes, yes, exactly.
So we are interested. We are interested in that.
Yes, yes, the South. It will be great to see that also harmonious. I mean, they have their own problems, perhaps more complex than yours, but you are hopeful too for them?
Oh, yeah, of course. I hope so. I hope the Southerners are the nearest people to us in the world. I have Southerner in my family, and there are many families which have wives and husbands from the South. So the South is part of us. The South, politically, there is secession, but we have so many things in common. We have a common history. We have common hopes and aspirations for stability. And as Alex Duval has said, who is an honest critic of the Sudan, he said these two Sudans will either rise together or fall together. I prefer that we rise together.
I hope so. But what I do hold in my heart is the same hope as you, that Sudan will come to a great moment where it is a truly peaceful country, both north and south.
Inshallah, I thank you very much. I hope so, and I say Ameen.
Bless you. Thank you for this interview.
And thanks for inviting me.